Good afternoon, Year 10. I'm going to carry on with our hormones topic today, talking about the menstrual cycle and puberty. So obviously this is a very applicable topic, it's quite an interesting topic with quite a few hormones involved. In fact, we're going to learn about 5 hormones today. So there's a lot to go through today. 4 questions on the board for a starter. You get those down in your books, just the answers, not the questions. So pause me and do those. Right, so the first question is, what is the function of glucagon? And we said glucagon last week. We said that it causes glycogen to be broken down into glucose when you have too low blood sugar in order to raise your blood sugar. What does TSH do, and what will be the effects of this? TSH causes thyroxine to be released from the thyroid gland. And the effects of that will be an increase in basal metabolic rate and increase in respiration. What gland releases adrenaline? Well, that is the adrenal glands. And where is it found? On top of the kidneys. What causes type 1 diabetes? Well, that is a genetic issue. It's down to not enough insulin being created from your pancreas. And how can it be treated? That can be treated with insulin injections, is the easiest way. You also have to control your diet and do enough exercise. Fine, so today we're going to go through the menstrual cycle and puberty. Now, ignore those numbers there. So we're going to be looking at something fairly much around level 8 if you can get to the top of these levels. Now, explain the function of several key named hormones in the menstrual cycle. That is the most difficult thing we're going to do today. We're going to go through the menstrual cycle in a lot of detail. Now, if I taught you the menstrual cycle when you were in year 7, you will already have done some of this. But most of you will not. Describe in detail the main stages of the menstrual cycle. Again, that's not too difficult. And state what the menstrual cycle is. I'm going to add on to this lesson, just to kind of get it out of the way almost, just a few slides on puberty and understanding what causes puberty. Fine, we're actually going to start with puberty. It's literally 3 or 4 slides, just to move on from that. Now, the first thing is, I'm not going to insult you by trying to teach you what happens in your bodies during puberty. I think everyone remembers that from year 7, but I do need to make sure that you remember that. So, I'm going to give you a table there. I'd like you, from your own knowledge, to fill that in. We'll go through the answers of that, and then that's all the teacher going to do on the changes that happen during puberty. So you want to fill it in with what changes in boys from before puberty to after puberty, what changes in girls, and what changes in both. So you have, with drawing of the table, 3 or 4 minutes for this. Fine. So, changes in boys. Now, we're looking at things like increased shoulder width. We're talking about penis enlargement. We're talking about testicle enlargement. We're talking about large amounts of body hair growth and facial hair growth. Now, it's important to understand that both men and women do have body hair growth, but it's larger in men. Then you're going to be looking at a voice breaking, so Adam's apple formation, increased musculature. Can I think of anything else off the top of my head? I probably missed 1 or 2, but those ones will do you just fine. Changes in girls, you've got breast formation, you've got menstrual cycle, you've got increasing width of hips, you've got slight deepening in voice, but not large amounts, so it's not called voice breaking. You also have body hair growth there. We'll come to changes in both in a minute. And that will do me for now as well, I think. Changes in both. You are looking at increased height. So both of them gain increased height and therefore increased weight, but that's just as a product of increased height. Talking about body hair growth, both of them do grow hair on their bodies. And do I need anything else for that? Oh, emotional changes, of course. Becoming attracted to the opposite sex, that kind of an idea. So that will do just fine. Now, you're only going to be asked for 1 or 2 of these in a test, and in all honesty, it never comes up just because of how obvious it is. But technically, we have to go through it, so we just have. Fine. Now, the one thing we might not know, the one term you might not know, is this term secondary sexual characteristic. So each of those changes there causes a secondary sexual characteristic. So you were talking about something like increased shoulder width. That is a secondary sexual characteristic. Now, broadly, a secondary sexual characteristic is something that can be used to tell the sexes apart, to tell male from female, which is not entirely necessary for being male or female. So the primary sexual characteristic is having a penis or having a vagina. That is the primary sexual characteristic. The others are secondary. So having breasts is a secondary sexual characteristic of women. Having a deep voice is a secondary sexual characteristic in men. We need to know that term. We need to know that secondary sexual characteristics occur during puberty. And we need to then be able to talk about the two hormones that cause that, which we'll go on to in the next slide. So can you please take down those notes? Pause me if you haven't been writing while I've been talking, and we will get going. Next slide. So, once you've understood what a secondary sexual characteristic is, and everyone knew that they existed, even if they didn't know that term, then we're going to talk about what hormones cause that. So, we're talking about two kinds of hormones, and in all honesty, you probably know both of them already. Particularly the one from men. But we're going to start with women. So we're talking about estrogen. Now this word estrogen can be spelled two ways, one with an O and one without. Americans spell it without an O because they're not great with silent letters. We spell it with an O, so please do spell it with an O. That's how we spell it. So in women, the main hormone to control puberty is estrogen. Now, everything that then occurs to girls, breast development, all of that, anything that you can associate with puberty is caused by estrogen. And it's produced by the ovaries. So I'm going to talk a lot more about the ovaries and what they do in a second. And actually, in fact, we're going to talk a lot more about estrogen because it's got a key part in the menstrual cycle. But for now, we need to know that it's produced in the ovaries and it causes the changes during puberty. And on the right, you can see some of those changes. You do not need to copy all of that down, nor do you need to know the vast majority of it. But it does have enormous numbers of uses. So get down those notes if you haven't already. Now, the male hormone is testosterone. And again, you can see some effects down here, mostly to do with puberty, some not, mostly. So, again, this causes all of the changes that happen to boys as they go through puberty, and it also leads to the production of sperm. And it is found in the testes. It's made in the testes and transferred around the body. And again, it has wide-ranging effects. It affects most of the cells in your body. But the main effects are the ones you see during puberty. From increased strength and musculature, through hair growth, through increased sex drive, that kind of an idea. All of that's testosterone. It's worth noting that these hormones can cause other hormones to be activated. So it's not just testosterone and estrogen on their own, but those are the drivers, those are the key hormones. Again, get down those notes if you haven't already. Fine. So that's all we're going to say about puberty. Now, puberty, I've always viewed, you do need to know about it for GCSE. I've always viewed as a topic which is best left for Year 7. We did study it in Year 7, and I'm assuming that most people know most of the changes that happen during puberty. If there is any confusion there about what testosterone causes, about the different changes that occur during puberty, do contact your teacher, they'll be able to help you a lot with that. I don't want you to be left behind if you're confused by any of this. We're going to move on to the menstrual cycle, which needs a lot more careful learning, because it's a lot more difficult. So let's spend some time on that. Now, hopefully everyone remembers from Year 7 what the menstrual cycle is. So the menstrual cycle is the cycle which involves an egg maturing and being released so that a woman is capable of having a baby. And then if that egg is not fertilized, it then goes on to be removed from the body. That's the whole point of the menstrual cycle. And as part of that, you have the period, or what we call menstruation, where the dead tissue from inside the uterus and the egg, small amounts of blood are released from the vagina. This is all the menstrual cycle. Now we're going to go through the stages in order, and you need to get them down as we're going along. I will pause very briefly at the end of each one, just so you can pause me in case you haven't got the notes down as I've been talking. So, firstly, number one, technically it's a cycle, so you can start anywhere. I'm going to start with an egg being released from the ovaries. Now this happens roughly once every 28 days. It is extremely important you understand that not every woman has a 28-day menstrual cycle. It can go a very wide range around that. But 28 days is kind of your dead average. Now ovulation in this kind of dead average cycle would happen on day 13 to 15. In fact, we tend to just say day 14 for ease. Again, if you don't have a 28-day cycle as a woman, it won't happen on day 14. It will happen about halfway through. So, 28 days we have ovulation. That's the first key term we need to know. That's what it's called when the egg is released. That's why that's in bold. And again, it happens on day 14. Fine, I'm going to move on to slide 2 now. Stage 2, once the egg's been released, it moves down the oviduct. Now, as part of that, it has to be fanned along by cilia. And this is the second time we've heard the term cilia in GCSE. I wonder whether you can think of what the other one is. And the answer is that it's found in the lungs as well, and in the trachea to after mucus up towards the top of your throat, so that any bacteria that are trapped in there can be swallowed down into your stomach acid. Here, though, the cilia are going to waft those eggs up the oviduct, and it's going to travel along towards the uterus. Now, eggs do not live very long. They only survive for about a day or two after ovulation. And if you think about it, that's the only time you can possibly get pregnant. As a woman, if your egg has been released, the egg has to have been released for it to get fertilised. Otherwise, if it's in the ovary, it can't get fertilised. Sperm can't get into the ovary, otherwise it'd be horrible. You'd have thousands of babies. But no, you have to wait for it to be released, and it has to be alive. So you've got that period between it being released and it being dead. And that's about 24 hours to 48 hours. And it usually happens that it dies around 16 days into kind of an average cycle. Of course, I'm going to keep repeating that is very changeable. Now, it takes sperm several days to move up that far into the fallopian tube that it can actually fertilise the egg. So actually, you have a couple have to have had sex days before the egg is released during ovulation in order for the couple to get pregnant. However, it's very important that you're careful here. It's completely unpredictable when the egg will be released. And actually, eggs can be released at really odd times. So a woman can get pregnant almost any time within that cycle. It's not a good way of predicting. It's certainly not a good method of contraception to just not have sex except on day 14 to 16. That doesn't work, because eggs are released at different times every month. It's quite unpredictable. So that's the end of that slide 2. We're going to move on to slide 3. Right. Now, this is where we get onto talking about the uterus. Now, all the way through this point, the uterus gets ready if there is going to be a fertilized egg. If we have fertilized egg, the uterus has to be thick lining, filled with nutrients, all the things that the baby will need to stay alive in their head. And so what has to happen is that the uterus lining will go up, ready for potential fetus. And this is happening in the background throughout days 7 to 16-ish. Right, so we've got the normal endometrial lining on your right of your left, and the endometrial hypothalamus is filled up with lots of nutrients that are ready for a baby to put there. Fine. everything was. Now, this is an issue in a way, because lining is so full of nutrients when you have a baby, because it's so full of all the things that are good for living things to live on. It's also a fantastic base of bacteria to grow. So, if you're not careful, bacteria will grow very readily on the lining. There are protections against this. For instance, the vagina is full of antibacterial fluids, and cervix just above the vagina is lots of mucus in it, it's quite sticky, and very thin, it's quite difficult to get through for bacteria. Regardless, if you leave the lining there permanently, eventually bacteria will get in, grow, colonize the area, and you will die of horrible sepsis and nothing. So you can't keep that lining there permanently. So what happens is that every month, just as the egg dies, the egg then stops signaling to build that lining, and the lining can be lost with the dead egg during menstruation. So all those nutrients, all that thickening that have been going ready for the baby is lost as part of the period, part of menstruation. Now, copy that down. This is happening after the egg dies, if it's not fertilized. We're talking about day 16, 17, but again, that can change, obviously. Fine. And then what happens is that Right. So stage 4 is menstruation. There is a major issue with having thick lining for nutrients and blood, all the things that are good for living things to survive. And that is a magnet for bacteria. If bacteria gets into the uterus and it has a thick lining full of nutrients, that bacteria will grow completely out of control. And if you allow that to happen, you can do all kinds of sepsis and horrible things. Now, therefore, we can't keep the lining continually. We have to lose the lining at least once every 28 days. Now, that is to reduce the risk of bacteria growing. If the egg is fertilized, that's fine. The egg continues to grow. What happens is that the cervix gets plugged up with mucus. There's impossible for bacteria to get in. The baby will grow there for 9 months. Be born, that's fine. The woman won't have a period, won't have menstruation happening during time she's pregnant. But if the egg is not fertilized, then every month get rid of this lining along with the dead egg, just in case, just to prevent bacteria growing. This is happening between days 0 to roughly 7, about a week. Again, it's very variable. So, we've kind of done the cycle at this point. Now, I'd like you to open up a sheet that's attached onto the line for the first lesson. And the sheet basically looks like this, with a load of statements and a load of things you need to cover. What you need to do is either you need to open up your Word document and you need to highlight the correct bits with the correct colours, or you need to remove text boxes to correct places. So, for instance, one of the boxes will say menstruation is happening. That needs dragging up top right here. You need to end up with a fill-in diagram with the correct text in the right places and colour them in the right areas so you can see what's happening each time. That goes into a bit more detail, actually, than what I've just said. So spend, it's going to take you probably 5 or 6 minutes if you're a huge user, more like 10 minutes if you're a higher user, cutting because cutting takes time. You want to probably keep you need to print it out when you're able to do that. But that's up to you. Final if you don't have work where you're doing it, and you don't have printer, then you can just draw this diagram out very simply. Just do two circles and numbers around it. Don't diagram in the middle, and then you will have that sorting. You may make that easily. Fine, I will give you 8 minutes. Have time to just pause it and complete that sheet in its entirety. So let's go through some analysis. Here's the sheet that you had at top part of these. It's with colour in red when here is happening. And then you should shade that in days 1 to 5. So let's say you make that blue, and blue should be days 1 to 5 here. Again, I say 1 to 7, it's completely irrelevant. It changes the average is 7, the sheet is 5. Some of them are very shorter than that, some of them are much longer, 7 days. The egg is developing. Now let's take a thought for you. You know the egg will release between day 30 and 50. You know the dead egg will release the body at day 5. Therefore, the egg must be developing, and the new egg is developing between day 6 and 12. So this bit here, day 6 and 12, is when the egg is developing. The egg is released, again, anywhere from day 13 to 15. The egg might be fertilized just a couple of days after that, because it dies 1 or 2 days after it's released. So it can only be fertilized 1 or 2 days afterwards. And then the uterus to get itself ready. It is from wherever you decide the egg might be fertilized all the way around to day 28. And at day 28, the body realizes, if you like, that they're not going to be a fertilization, and we lose this line. So even long after the egg has died, we continue to bear the line, just in case. It takes some time for that signal to get through. And there were some statements to add to your drawing. Down here. Zoom out, let's get the screen. There we are. So between day 1 and 5, we do that between day 1 and 5. And similarly by day 7 and between day 30 and 15. But okay, so the planning is shared. A small amount of light released because it was on the period. Fine. The egg is not fertilized. Depends on what day you decide, it'll be around 16 or 17. Between day 30 and 15, the egg is released 1 to 2 ovaries. I'll match between day 30 and 15. The egg travels down the rib tissue and the lining continues to thicken. That's happening all the way from 16 to 28. So the live dead continues to travel down the fallopian tube to the uterus. If it's dead, it's released part of the period. Then you've got by day 7, the lining starts to break down about day 7. And the lining of the uterus starts to grow and egg right in the ovary between day 6 and 12. So all the way from day 6 to 28, lining is growing. Fine, I hope that's helpful. If you've got that sheet correct, then you've understood the stages of menstrual cycle. We did study this in year 7, I hope you understood that. If you haven't, go back, re-watch my video, and just try and do that diagram properly. I think this is the ideal way to kind of organize the information. Try and get it done properly. If you have any questions, you ask each other. This is a relatively complicated topic. Fine, let's get rid of that. And then let's go back to our PowerPoint. So, the menstrual cycle. We've named it stages. Now you have to know what hormones cause those stages. Once you've got that, that's the end of the menstrual cycle. This is actually more complicated than anything we've done so far, because there are 4 hormones involved. Now, we know what hormones are, it's a real simplification slide. The 4 hormones which we need to know about the cycle are estrogen, progesterone, FSH, which stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, which stands for luteinizing hormone. You can call them FSH, LH, that's really fine. Fine, so let's look at what each one does. Estrogen and progesterone are involved in the lining of the uterus. So estrogen builds the lining up and causes it to start growing. So the more estrogen you have, the more the lining will grow. Progesterone maintains that growth. Okay? So you have to have them work together. Estrogen and progesterone work together to first grow estrogen lining, and then maintain that growth. If you just have estrogen, you'll grow lining and you'll be lost. If you just have progesterone, the lining will be maintained, but you won't grow anymore. So you've got to have both to grow the lining. And now both of these hormones also inhibit FSH. Now I'd like to take down those notes there. And I'd like to also say that both inhibit FSH. That sugar lining is both inhibit FSH. We'll come to what that means by that later on. Another key point when the egg dies, that's why the uterus lining breaks down, because the egg is the one who releases these hormones. The ovary initiates these hormones, but the egg takes over that and releases these hormones. So that when it dies, suddenly there's a lot less estrogen and progesterone, and the lining is lost. That's why the lining is lost if you get pregnant. Because the egg doesn't die, so it keeps secreting estrogen and progesterone to keep that lining, because you really need a baby. But when the egg dies, it stops producing estrogen and progesterone, the levels will slowly drop, and then the lining goes. And that's the period. Get those notes, and then we'll move on from FSH to LH. So, estrogen and progesterone lining, FSH and LH are around the egg. FSH causes the new egg to grow. So once the ovil's dead, FSH makes new egg grow. Now, I hope you learned that before you won't really use that progesterone. Stop FSH working. If you already have an egg, you only want one. You don't want loads. So if you buy an egg, that egg will pumping out progesterone. Not only will that cause the lining to grow and develop, it will also stop any other eggs being released because it blocks FSH. It's a really neat system. So FSH causes the new egg to grow, but only if old ones are dead, because estrogen can stop it. And LH, luteinizing hormone, causes the egg to be released once it's ready. So once the egg gets to that size, about day 13, 14, 15, a big spike of LH happens, and the egg is pushed out of the ovary like a sheep. There's a really complicated biochemical pathway with this to make sure it's timed perfectly. We don't really know about that. We just need what each hormone does. So estrogen builds the lining, progesterone maintains lining, both block FSH. FSH grows the egg, LH releases the egg. If you've got that, you've got the hormone. There are a lot of them, not difficult. And I have to say, we're going to go over this huge amount. Most of these lessons are going to be broken down to 7 hormones and what they do. So if you don't remember it today, you definitely will remember it by the topic. It's going to be drilled at the end. So let's skip forward a bit. We'll finish off the lesson. Now, a little task you've got there. I think it's right now. So without looking at the notes, can you sort these? Which of these hormones do these states refer to? Some of the states refer to more than one hormone. Have a look at that one. So hopefully we've got uterus lining. We should know that estrogen. Progesterone is not built lining, it maintains it. There is maintenance lining, and progesterone actually doesn't have a function here. Causes egg release. That's LH. LH was typically released. Make sure FSH. Blood FSH has estrogen and progesterone. Made by pituitary. Now, that's a very interesting question, and it's slightly different. And this is something I should have mentioned earlier. Both LH and FSH are released by pituitary. And this is where we come to a helpful memory thing. Every hormone which you would traditionally abbreviate, which has an acronym. So LH, FSH, and TSH is released by the pituitary. Not universally true, but for the one TSH is true. And any hormone has an abbreviation is released by the pituitary. So if you're asked, well, which hormone releases this hormone, and it's an abbreviation, even if you can't remember anything else about that hormone, just write pituitary. Because LH, FSH, TSH, they're released by the pituitary. We'll come on later on. Made by ovaries, estrogen, progesterone. And also by the egg. Fine. That's not easy, particularly where it ain't, because you can tell you. But that's a nice summary. You're going to get down to where in your LH and your FSH they make by your children. Right. Now that's pretty much what again got one more set of questions, and again, just have a look at that. Make sure you do them. Don't write down them if you need to, and then we will be done. So answers: scientific period, menstruation, make sure you're spelling it right, the U, MEN, STIUATION. What is the time to release egg ovulation? What days is it? Right, 14, right, 13, 15. What factors is progesterone lining uterus maintaining the lining? Stop being lost. Fine. That's the end of today's lesson. It's been a long one today. I anticipate it's going to take 50 minutes. Hopefully I don't take a huge amount longer. Looking forward to seeing you and hoping that's quite straightforward. Any questions at all from the teacher, just ask them what the answers to these questions are. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.